Welcome to 56-Bit Cloud Cafe, your go-to destination for all tech topics in the cloud. I'm Athir Zalat.
And I'm Patrick Camilleri. And together we'll be addressing various cloud topics.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the final episode of our ECS series. Today, we will explore some of the advanced features of ECS and examine real-world use cases where ECS shines. So let's start. Observing the service at a low level and considering the presence of Margate, it sounds complicated for non-tech professionals. What are some advanced features of ECS, such as task placement strategies and integration with AWS Fargate?
ECS offers a lot of advanced features which probably the average person will not ever use. But they are there for them to be used if the complexity of the application and the scale of an application gets to that point where you need to use them. An example of this would be the task placement strategies. You have different ways of placing your tasks or your containers on different servers. You can define, for example, I want these tasks to run on a specific type of server because that type of server gives me more efficiency, or maybe because that type of server has a graphical processing unit on it and I need those GPUs when running my application. Or you can specify even more complex rules by having a Lambda function that acts as your scheduler, the piece of software which decides where a task runs or not. So that can be done. Another, I would say not advanced, but rather important piece of the puzzle would be AWS Fargate. You usually use EC2 with ECS, but now you have also the option to use Fargate, which is, let's say, a serverless version of what EC2 does when it comes to containers. So both EC2 and Fargate, they will run those containers for you. They don't orchestrate, they just run them. They are the worker nodes. And Fargate is a serverless option on that front. It completely eliminates your responsibility in making sure that those containers run. It doesn't go into the container itself, but the ecosystem around that container is all handled by AWS.
So for now, we've heard the technical and operational side of the service. Let's see the business side of it too. Can you walk us through some real-world use cases where ECS has been successfully implemented?
There are obviously many instances and use cases that we can mention. Ideally, ECS is used wherever there are microservices architectures. This is an architecture where basically a software is split into different services. Instead of having a single piece of software, you have multiple pieces of software. And this has a number of advantages, like, different services can scale independently. You can use different types of servers for each service. And wherever you have these services, a microservice architecture, which can independently be controlled, this is ideal for containers and ultimately for ECS. You have companies like Amazon Prime and Volkswagen and Spotify who have leveraged ECS to host their containers, their backend systems, which you can imagine has massive traffic volumes, and it can be easily handled through ECS. It's also well suited for CI/CD pipelines, for continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines, which allow for very rapid application deployments. So ECS can integrate with tools from AWS, from GitLab, GitHub, that ensure that all you have to do is push your application and it gets uploaded and run on ECS without any downtime and without much hassle.
With AWS, there is always a consideration for the worst-case scenarios and how to avoid it. How does ECS handle high availability and fault tolerance?
Right, so here it's important to make a distinction between the software that is the orchestrator, that orchestrates which tasks run, That software, the orchestrator, is highly available by default. It runs on multiple physical, behind the scenes inside AWS, it runs on multiple physical servers in different physical locations, and high availability there is guaranteed by AWS. It's given as a software, as a service, basically. But that is one layer. The other layer is your tasks. Your tasks, they run on multiple servers. If you wish, they can run on multiple servers, potentially in different availability zones. And availability zones are always separated from each other physically, and like that, by running your containers on multiple servers in multiple AZs, you have high availability. This is something that you have to set up. It's very easy to do. And ultimately, if a server goes down, the same number of tasks can be brought up in other healthy servers somewhere else by ECS. This is done automatically. And yes, you can auto-scale, right? So high availability and fault tolerance is also about scaling, because if you have a high demand, you don't want your system to go down. So auto-scaling out, increasing your resources and going back in to save money, all that is handled through auto-scaling in EC2, Fargate, and ECS.
We know that not every implementation is all sunshine and breeze. What are some common challenges faced when using ECS, and how can they be mitigated?
ECS is a system, a service like all other. There are some, although it removes a lot of the complexity around orchestrating containers, there is still some, you have to have an idea of what's happening, but ultimately that upskilling is not that difficult to achieve. It's quite easy. One important thing to understand is also the security part, making sure that you set up proper policies and roles to allow who can and when can they access the resources of ECS, the clusters, the services, the tasks. Another challenge might be monitoring, although it integrates really well with CloudWatch and with OpenTelemetry and Prometheus and a bunch of other tools. Ultimately, you need to set that up properly to ensure that you have visibility into your costs, performance, and security issues as well. So it's no different from any other service, right? It's the usual suspects. Security, monitoring, logging. These are all things that at 56-bit we do all the time, and we have templates that bring these things up to reduce the time to market for these objects in the cloud, to make sure that they run properly in the cloud.
And by now, we've reached the end of our episode. Thank you for tuning into our ECS series. We hope you found this exploration of ECS insightful and informative. Stay tuned for more cloud tech topics in future episodes. Until then, happy cloud computing!
If you have questions, suggestions, or want to share your feedback, connect with us on social media.
Also, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and to leave us a review to help others find their way to the Cloud Cafe.